Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We've got uh, a really interesting one today.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
yeah.
case that has been all over the headlines.
It's been everywhere.
So, um, we're talking about the recent acquittal of New England Patriots. Uh, Safety, Jabrill Peppers,
Big name.
huge name, yeah.
Big
And we're
case?
going to be diving into an Associated Press article that was published just a couple of days ago, January 24th, 2025.
Fresh off the press.
Hot off the press, exactly. So
Yeah.
we're going to really break it down and see what we can unpack here.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing about this case is just how much it revolved around these two completely different stories, like what actually happened that night.
Right.
And, you have the woman accusing Peppers, and she delivered this, like, really powerful testimony claiming that he assaulted her, grabbed her by the neck, slammed her against a wall, even pushed her down the stairs.
Wow. That sounds really, she must have been incredibly emotional.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, yeah.
Yeah. And to add to that, we've got a police report that seems to uh, support at least some of her claims. Right.
Right.
And that she also received medical attention at the scene. So, that's definitely some serious stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then, you've got Pepper's side of the story.
Yeah, so he gets on the stand and just completely denies everything, right? Like every single accusation. He tells the police that, he thinks this whole thing is some kind of like setup to ruin his career, right? Like sabotage his career in the NFL.
Wow. So it's like, she's saying one thing, he's saying another. It's like, okay, what does the evidence show?
Well, that's the other interesting thing here, right? Because
Yeah.
there are these videos, multiple videos from that night that show Peppers asking this woman who was naked to leave his house.
Hmm.
But then, the woman, she comes back and says, yeah, but those videos also show him, filming her and taunting her while she's trying to, like, gather her things.
So the video is there,
Yeah.
but it's like open to interpretation.
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of a weird situation. Like it's not, you can't really tell what's going on.
No, it doesn't paint a clear picture.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess the jury had to really kind of decipher all of that. So how did the defense actually approach this whole case?
Well, Pepper's attorney basically just, goes right at the woman's account, right? Starts raising all these questions about, how consistent her story really is, the severity of the injuries she claimed to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then he even brings up the fact that she filed this $9.5 million civil lawsuit against Peppers.
Oh, wow.
Suggesting, maybe she's just after the money.
I see. So it's like he's painting her as trying to get something out of this.
Exactly. Yeah.
So so the jury's got this huge amount of evidence, all these different stories, right? Like how did the prosecution and the defense actually present their cases? Like what was their their strategy?
Right. So the prosecution, they really hammered home the emotional aspect of the woman's testimony, right, and the initial police report. And they just kept coming back to, how brutal the attack was, how she needed immediate medical attention.
Yeah.
And they're trying to paint this picture of Peppers as, this aggressive guy who uses his size and his strength to hurt her.
Okay. And then the defense, what did they do?
So the defense, they basically spent their time trying to poke holes in her story. They pointed out inconsistencies in what she said. They talked about the lack of really concrete physical evidence to back up these injuries she claimed to have. And they used the video footage to try and show Peppers as, just a guy who was trying to get an unwanted guest out of his house.
Okay, interesting. So they're both, they're using the same evidence,
Right.
but they're telling completely different stories.
Exactly.
It's amazing how I guess that's part of what makes this so fascinating, right?
Totally. And I think it highlights the challenge that juries face, when they're dealing with these conflicting testimonies, because it's not just about figuring out if someone's lying.
Yeah.
It's also about understanding how people's perceptions and interpretations can be so different.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did the jury ultimately decide after all this back and forth?
Well, after deliberating, they found Jabrill Peppers not guilty on all charges.
Wow. I mean, that must have been a pretty I don't know. I'm sure the courtroom was surprised.
Yeah, huge moment.
Yeah. So what happened afterwards? I mean, did this have any impact on his career?
Yeah, I mean, you can't deny that it did. He was put on the commissioner's exempt list, right after the accusations came out, which meant he missed 7 games.
Oh, wow.
But, the Patriots, they stuck with him. They even extended his contract through 2027.
Huh. That's interesting. I mean, this whole case, it really makes you think, right, about due process and how public opinion plays into these things.
It's a big one, right? Like, how do we hold these athletes who are, you know, in the public eye? How do we hold them accountable?
Right. And how much does fame and wealth and all that stuff, how does that play into the legal system?
For sure. As a Patriots fan, you probably followed this whole thing pretty closely. What was your first reaction when this all came out?
I mean, honestly, I was just shocked, you know. It's hard to picture that, like, with these athletes that we see, these big
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
And it's, it was interesting to see how quickly everyone kind of like made up their minds, right? Before we even knew all the facts.
It's like that court of public opinion thing, right?
Yeah.
It's happening at the same time as the actual legal process.
Exactly. It's crazy. So, I mean, I think this deep dive has really given us given us all a lot to think about. It makes you wonder about how much uh, public perception, how much the media, how much all of that can actually affect the outcome of a case.
Yeah.
Even though we have this whole legal system, this whole process.
It's a big question. What are your final thoughts on that? Like, looking back on all this?
I mean, it's tough to say, right? It's a complicated issue,
For sure.
and I think it's something that we all need to kind of grapple with and think about, as we see these kinds of cases unfold.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that needs to keep happening.
For sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time.
See you later.